today we are here to understand and to equip ourselves how to plan, monitor, and evaluate our work towards SDGs. I'll start with Dr. Manju, a development professional with 2.5 decades of experience and goodwill in the development sector in Asia, Africa, and Middle East. She has organized various capacity buildings in planning, monitoring, and evaluations and training, established rigorous monitoring and evaluation systems and processes at institutional levels, conducted grant monitoring and evaluations, stakeholder engagement, and communication. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Manchu. Can you share with us some of the skills you built during your training, both for NGOs and the corporates?
Thank you, Seema, for the question. Yes, indeed, it's been a pleasure to be able to work with NGOs and CSR institutions and government bodies on building their capacities on planning, monitoring, and evaluation. Under ideal circumstances, the training needs to be taken up at the time of planning or maybe even before planning, because a lot of people who are responsible for planning are not familiar with the planning methodologies or tools. So when we are called in for a training, if we are called in for a training on planning, then we work with the teams on how to analyze the problem, which is called the problem tree analysis, how to plan a solution, which is called the solution tree analysis. So both of these things, when you put together, you come up with a log frame. So a log frame is just one way of putting together what you want to do, how you want to do it, and what will that thing achieve in the short term and what it can achieve in the long term. So we educate or rather build capacities of the team members and the planners, at times even the board members, on how we should realistically plan, how we should holistically plan. Then when we do the log frame or the results-based framework, we also teach them how to use the same framework to build your work plan, where you know what you need to do in each quarter. And then you can also use the same log frame to develop your monitoring and evaluation framework. As to for each activity, what is the tool that we will use to capture this data? Who will capture this data? How frequently will this data be captured? So all this is developed on the same framework. We don't use different frameworks for it. So that's the organized way of looking at things. So when we develop a log frame, we not only talk about the activities, we also talk about the output. How many people will be trained? How many trainings will be held? How many fans? How many computers will be provided to how many schools? So this is the output bit. So once provisioned, the output is achieved. But then we also write in the log frame what will be the outcome. So we think through what will these computers be used for? What is it that we are recommending? So are we advocating for classes on coding for students? Are we advocating for digital content or anything else? And therefore, what will that lead to over and above the education that they are currently getting in schools? That is the impact. We then discuss with the organization, the board, and the implementation team, and at times also the community, if the organization is interested, and put it together in the log frame. Similarly, I'll go to the part where we do the planning framework, which is the M&E framework, or the log frame, or the results framework, whatever you may want to call it. The part which talks about the outputs is the part that you monitor. But the part that talks about outcomes is the part that you evaluate. So when you do your quarterly meetings or when you do your monthly meetings, what you discuss or what you review is the achievement against the quarterly targets on the outputs. You do not dive into outcomes. But then we need to have the process in place for each activity, so that if the activity gets implemented in accordance with the SOP, it is very likely to achieve the outcome or the impact that it is intended to achieve. Most of us miss the boat there because we get too focused on the activity. When you put together a host of processes that need to be followed, you create a system. So that is the M&E system. What needs to be done and how it needs to be done. So we measure, when we say we are doing monitoring, we measure not only the progress on numbers, we also measure the accuracy with which the fidelity with which the processes are being implemented. So as envisioned, so should it be implemented. That gap should not be there. So that is monitoring. Once you've monitored, you sit together as a team and then look at the data or the information that is coming in, maybe on a monthly basis. You can also do that on a quarterly basis. Now, once you have taken a look at your data, you look at it from the point of view of what had we set out to achieve in the last quarter versus what have we been able to achieve. And therefore, do we need to revise our work plan for the next quarter? That's when donor engagement comes in, because you share your quarterly review with the donor. So when you add up your quarter for a year, it becomes your annual data. But that is only on outputs. Now you need outcomes. So that's when case studies help. That's when what have the team been observing on the ground? What are the few changes that are already visible on the ground? That helps. So the team needs to know the qualitative methods, of how information can be captured without actually going into in-depth evaluation. Anecdotes, case studies, testimonials, these are good ways in which you can, convince your donor that yes, work is happening. So this is something that you do for reviewing and reporting to the donor. Now, the challenge that you mentioned where you're saying that, 50 lakhs is not too much. And every year we are required to do an evaluation. Not all evaluations cost so much. So the trainings that we offer on PME also teach teams on different kinds of evaluations that can be done, different kinds of sampling that can be done, and how does that have a bearing on the budget. So it's essentially what you want to find out versus how you need to find out. So we try and balance that. Normally, impact assessment cannot be done on an year-on-year basis. Project state, and I think Pradeep will agree with me, anything from 3 to 5 years to reach a stage where you can start capturing the long-term impact. You can capture short-term outcomes. You can capture intermediate outcomes like gain in knowledge, gain in skills. But whether those skills are actually being used and if that is translating into increased income for the family, and if that increased income is translating into better quality of life in terms of health and education and so on and so forth, these are long-term things that you do. So we also need to be very clear about what we can measure and when we can measure that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Manju, for concisely sharing your thoughts on planning, monitoring, and evaluation. It is equally important not only to build the capacity of the people on the ground, but also of the management and the planners, because they also need to understand certain facts which are important for them.